Building a family can be a complicated, messy, lonely, and sometimes heartbreaking process. But you don't have to navigate this challenging journey alone. Welcome to the All Paths podcast, where we support and celebrate all of the different ways there are to grow your family. We're your hosts, Emily and Kate from the nonprofit organization All Paths Family Building. And today we're talking with our friend and colleague, Janene, about her work in this space. Janene, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm so excited to be here, Emily and Kate.
So we are fortunate enough to partner with you on advocacy and have you as a board member, but could you introduce yourself to our listeners who might not know you as well?
Sure. My name is Janene Oleaga, and I am a family formation attorney and reproductive rights advocate. In my private practice, I represent clients who are growing their families in all different ways: sperm donation, egg donation, surrogacy, adoption, embryo donation. And through serving my clients over these years, it has led me to All Paths and a number of other advocacy efforts. I spend a lot of time doing state and federal advocacy in support of all families. And I'm happy to report that we've had positive legislation in Maine over the past few years, where I live with my husband and two daughters.
That's great. And so I would love to hear more about how, I mean, no pun intended, but how the path to this type of law, how you traveled that in this direction. I know you feel, and I agree, that you're in sort of the most joyful part of the law. So could you talk about how that happened?
Yeah, I think my path to assisted reproduction and fertility law and family formation is very different than a lot of my colleagues. I always was interested in representing people who were facing adversity. So I practiced criminal defense for a long time in Memphis, Tennessee. I had a incredible mentor. His name was Junie Ganguly when I was there. And I just always found such an interest in that. From there, I represented clients through the Immigrant Legal Advocacy Project in Portland. It was political asylum clients. And then I took some years off to raise my own family. I had seen so many of my friends and family members struggle to build their families while I was having my children. And I knew when I went back to practicing law that it had to be something different. And from the moment that I found this, I knew that that was what was next for me. And I've never looked back. I love what I do. It is so much joy. It is so nice to see happy families at the end of family building journeys.
That's wonderful.
I know there's other parts of family law that unfortunately they're so important, of course, but a lot of them are about sometimes endings or partings where obviously our whole mission and your work as well is about people trying so hard to grow families and to make those connections rather than sever them. So I know how meaningful that is to you. And one thing I just also want to commend you for is just how inclusive your law practice is. And I know that's very deliberate on your part. And so again, I'm not sure if there's a particular reason for that or if it's just who you are, but
my biggest inspirations in this world of family formation and assisted reproduction have been people who started with a premise of being inclusive. So anytime I met someone that I was just blown away by them, yourself included, Dr. Peng of Boston IVF, like that, the message that everyone is deserving of a family, that all families are valid, starting from a premise, regardless of your field of expertise, starting from a premise as inclusive and supportive as that has just guided me in the right direction throughout. And again, in representing private clients, but also in advocacy work. When you're reading bills, and Kate and Emily, I know we've both done this, when you're reading bills and you're coming from a place of inclusivity and something that's supportive of all families, you're reading that bill to make sure that that is a touch point of that bill. So I've loved working in all the advocacy that we've done together, and I hope that there's more of that to come. I know that there's more of that to come, so maybe I shouldn't hope, but I know that there's more to come. I'm excited about the work.
That's wonderful. It sounds like you support a whole lot of different types of families and different paths to family. So, what does a typical day look like for you in your practice?
Whew. Well, let's take today, for example. So I don't have court today, but I have been in court quite frequently, both in Maine and New York recently, whether it's adoption finalization or a parentage hearing. So if I have court, I usually have it in the morning, but not always. Certainly it's in the afternoon sometimes. I've met with two clients today, one prospective client and one client through who's becoming a parent through egg donation. And I love those meetings, typically over Zoom, but not always. Sometimes we meet in person. Um, my day ends earlier than most of my colleagues because when my kids get off the bus, I spend as much time as they will be interested to spend with me. So I spend a lot of time with them when they get off the bus. Usually after school extracurricular activities. If I have work to do, it'll get done later at night. But everyone's pretty understanding of that because all my clients are working to build families. So many of them are happy to meet at night. Maybe they don't want to talk about their intimate details of their life at work if they're still going to a physical office. And if they aren't, they're certainly understanding that I have children and I value that and I want to be around my kids as much as they allow. It's getting less and less, but they still like me for now.
Yes. Yes, they do. You're a very cool mama. But that's a great thing that I hadn't even thought of is that, especially having your own practice, there is a little more flexibility for you to have that. I always struggle or, I'm reluctant to talk about balance because I feel like that's a hard thing, but you can have a mix of your work during the day while they're at school and then time with them after school. That is another really good thing about the evolution of your career in this direction.
Absolutely. And there's no one more understanding than my clients who are building their families and either have children and are having a second or third child or hoping to have children. So
Yeah, it's funny you say that too, because sometimes people, not you, thankfully, but sometimes we'll have a board member or a committee member or other volunteer have to step back from working with All Paths Family Building because of their own often family obligations.
yeah,
And, they're always sort of like afraid to tell me. And I always am like, us, this is the cornerstone of our mission is family. So that always comes first. We always hate to lose good people from one of those roles, but when that's the reason, of course, how can we argue with that for sure?
totally. That is exactly how I feel, both at All Paths and in my practice. So
That's great. So you mentioned advocacy, which is so, I've loved having you as an advocacy partner in Maine and just in general, and just being a sounding board. And you're now the chair of our advocacy committee that All Paths has, which is great. And so again, like kind of how did that come about? It sounds like it felt like a natural offshoot of the work you were doing day to day, but have you felt like it's grown?
it has grown and it did happen so natural. And I never thought of myself as an advocate in any way until I was like already there doing it. I had never given thought of myself in that way or like spoken about myself in that way. But what I think happened in such a natural way was I was helping clients on an individual level and I loved that work. I don't want that to go away. I love meeting with individual clients. I love seeing their families grow. But the opportunity to influence legislation and help communities of people on a macro level was like, who better than my clients have joined me in advocating and shared their stories in support of the confirmatory adoption bill in Maine. Join me to say, like, we need this legislation to pass. That is so powerful. And thanks to those clients and Polly Crozier of GLAD, who All Paths honored this year, the law in Maine has changed now. And for generations to come and for families to come, their legal parentage is going to be protected because of that effort. So seeing that change in real time, like it's just like what passion is one word, sure, but like it's almost addicting. Like you want to do that for more people. So it's been so incredible to work with like-minded individuals like yourselves and just change makers that are on the board of All Paths and GLAD as well as a partner organization. It's nothing short of inspiring, but so much more than that.
I obviously couldn't agree more. I mean, I love the one-on-one interaction with people as well, but I think you can only do so much individually, like, and face the same have the same barriers over and over again before you start to be like, okay, we also need to go upstream and try to help these barriers from happening in the first place, and making the path, whether it's to confirmatory adoption or other types of parentage, make that more smooth, make access to insurance better, obviously. So it's so great. And it's so funny you say that. You're like, wait, I didn't even know I was an advocate, but here I am doing it. And like, people will say all the time, like, oh, I don't do advocacy, or like, I can't do advocacy. And then I'm like, well, you actually are doing it when you share your story of the challenges you faced trying to grow your family, and then potentially other challenges you faced with accessing care or accessing insurance, or both. That is advocacy. And then it's funny, we've also had people, like, if you ask them, do you know any legislators in your state? And they'll say, like, oh no, I'm not like very political. I'm not politically connected. And then you find out like their rep is like the little league coach in their town, and they do know
Yeah.
him. I'm like, you
Yeah.
know him. That's a connection. Like, you know his cell phone number. Like, that is great. Or, so it is really cool. So I mean, as you know, a big part of our mission at All Paths is making people feel comfortable with advocacy, that there are so many different ways to be an advocate. And you don't have to go like straight to testifying at a legislative hearing. And if you want to do that, we help you do that too. But a lot of people don't start there. I didn't start there. You start with like maybe meeting your own rep or senator, state rep and senator at an event, and just talking to them about your own journey and what you're going through very quietly. But legislators remember those conversations at
Absolutely.
in a coffee shop in their district more, I swear, than testimony at a hearing sometimes.
Because the legislators are getting the macro, they're not seeing those individual connections. So when they get that opportunity, that's what sticks with them, right? That human interaction. You're so right about all of that.
Yeah. And I know you've participated in Advocacy Day also, and now have been the team captain for Maine. So I know that's not until May of 2025, but I know it's already starting to be planned and
Oh, yeah.
everything. So do you want to talk about Advocacy Day a little bit too? It's close to all of our hearts.
I am ready for Advocacy Day, especially this year. And I hope everyone brings all of the energy and emotion that they've been feeling since, you know, the date. So I'm ready for Advocacy Day this year. That is so powerful. And most people are joining over Zoom now ever since COVID. There is nothing lost in the power of everyone joining over Zoom to share their stories with actual legislators that are sitting in DC that need to hear from their constituents, and having such a consistent and clear message from state to state across the board is so powerful. There's such a high that day when Advocacy Day is over. Everyone's on such a high. And I've stayed in touch, and everyone who advocates for Advocacy Day, both in Maine and New York, I've stayed in touch with all of them. Some of them have become really close friends. So I'm grateful to Advocacy Day for bringing us all together.
Well, that's really wonderful. The other thing that going virtual has done is made it so much more accessible. People that, beforehand weren't able to travel to DC to participate now can do so from their own couch. And it's talking with a lot of other advocates, it's also a little less scary. You're not standing or sitting in front of a group of people in a room. You're sitting on your couch sharing your story. It's a nice like entry level.
It's
Exactly. And it takes that out of it, that, well, it's still somewhat intimidating. And I've had people say, like, I didn't realize their face was going to be right there. But it takes out that scariness of standing in a room and sharing your story. And it also gives people access for, it's no surprise to anyone listening, fertility treatments are expensive. Non-traditional
Mhm.
family building, including adoption, is expensive. So not having to spend money to travel to attend Advocacy Day and still get your story out there is so important. So it's maybe the only thing I can be thankful to COVID for.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's why I think Advocacy Day, I know the last year and had all 50 states represented, which, as much as I loved the in-person Advocacy Day, it didn't have that as well. So, well, we'll definitely put a link to Advocacy Day in the show notes. As I think a lot of people know, Advocacy Day is a partnership between Resolve, the National Infertility Association, and the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, both of which are partners of ours. So that's great. And thank you for your leadership on Advocacy Day in our New England region too.
It's my favorite. Thanks, Kate.
Yeah. So one thing I should say we love about you is that you are a great connector. You love to, you meet someone and you're immediately thinking of like potential collaboration and also linking them to support and resources that they need, of course, as well. So I wanted to talk a little bit about one of those partnerships that you forged for All Paths, which was with Overseasoned Amy. So would you tell us a little bit about that? We've been very excited about that and it continues to bear fruit. So
I'm so happy that this finally worked, but Amy is like joy wrapped up in this pretty package, but is full of fight. And she has so much good energy and such a good message. I met her by chance at the winter market in Boston. I saw her reproductive rights gear and I was like, I have to know this person. She is incredible. So we said back in 2021, like, we have to do something together. And this was a perfect opportunity. So she worked with All Paths. For everybody listening, Amy Larson of Overseasoned Amy is absolutely incredible. She owns a store, Matriarch. Her products all have a very clear and supportive and inclusive message talking about people who inspire us, being inclusive. And Amy, we were lucky enough, All Paths, when I say we, I mean All Paths. We were lucky enough to collaborate with her on a recent design, which I'm wearing, which just came in the mail. It says Restore Reproductive Liberty. And some of the proceeds of this sale, Amy is gracious enough to donate back to All Paths. So we are grateful to her for that. And I'm so happy that it finally was the right time for a collaboration. So
yeah, it was so great. And we didn't even plan for you to wear it today, but that was perfect.
it arrived yesterday. I was too excited.
It was so good. And her store in Newport, Rhode Island is so awesome. So that was a great bridge that you built between us. So we're grateful for that.
I was happy to do it. And it was like right timing, right people.
Yeah, that's great.
So looking back just kind of at your career to this point, what have been the highlights? Are there any particular clients that you've worked with that stand out? Are there any advocacy wins that are really kind of top of your list?
Oh man, so many clients. I have so many clients. I don't know that they all necessarily want to be my friend, but I have kept so many as friends. I hope it was willingly on their side as well. There are so many clients that I still keep in touch with that just watching their family grow is the absolute best. So that's definitely some highlights. I had one adoption in particular this year that I'm thinking of where like no one left with a dry eye. So that stands out for sure on a micro level. For wins in Maine, I mean, fertility legislation in Maine, I think almost brought me to tears, but that was with All Paths. Confirmatory adoption with polycrosure of GLAD, that has been life-changing for so many of my clients. So those are definite highlights. And Maine Biz awarded me 40 under 40 in Maine. And at the time I was like really, really surprised and proud and just caught off guard that anyone was paying attention to like what I felt like was such small work at the time. So that felt like a huge highlight for me.
I know none of us here are in it in anything for recognition, but at the same time, I also think we all have a little bit of like, what's our role in the world and like, is what I do making a difference? And so an
Yes.
award like that is like, you feel seen and recognized, and it's so nice and it's
Yeah.
definitely deserved. But I can see what you mean in terms of being like, you're almost like little old me, but then you're like, you stand a little taller and you're like, yeah, yeah, yes, I
That's
deserve that.
exactly what it felt like in a way of like you working so hard on something and you're like, I hope it matters, in the world, right? So when someone says like we saw it and it mattered, it makes, you feel inspired to fight another day and advocate more. And that's what it felt like. So it was really cool.
That is really cool.
Absolutely. Well deserved. There's nothing little about the impact that you're having on families in Maine.
Oh, thank you, Emily.
Absolutely. And I must say, you're also a very feisty op-ed writer, and I am here for that.
The feistiness too was, I love that you said that. That's the right word because I think it's the word the editor used when she politely suggested I make a few edits.
I love that.
Particularly, yeah. So, and to her credit, she was absolutely right. Because the initial draft of the op-ed that I think you're referring to about the shooting that occurred in Maine last year, tragically, I had come out really hot, and maybe calling specific people out that was probably not in the best interest, for me and my family who reside here. So her suggestions were the right ones to be made, but that feistiness is not going anywhere, much to, I think, my husband's chagrin and maybe some other some other
Well, not
people.
us. Not
But
us. And
yeah,
well, and I think you're right. That's the role of an editor is like you wrote it probably at a very high emotion point, and it continues to be something that's highly emotional, but she she made it even stronger by lessening some of the temperature but keeping that feistiness. She kept that
yes,
spirit for sure, and it was excellent. So
she
uh
was the right person to receive the initial draft of that because
yeah.
and I've met actually another incredible highlight. One of my clients, I always ask people how they find me. And one of my clients said, I read what you wrote in the Portland Press Herald, and that's how I found you. And it was so cool because especially for them, I didn't know the connection. They weren't necessarily, near me. But it was
uh,
really cool.
That is really cool. And that obviously that was not your intention at all. But I think it's like one of those things where sometimes you do well by doing good. You did something so much from your heart in writing that op-ed, which again, I will add is advocacy. A lot of people don't realize that if they write a letter to the editor or an op-ed, it can be a form of advocacy. So that is so great. So, what kind of like questions and concerns are you particularly hearing right now since the presidential election results?
I am getting phone calls from past clients and prospective clients about, do I have enough to protect my family, right? We're on the birth certificate. Is that enough? We have a judgment of parentage. Is that enough? Do we need an adoption order? What about estate planning? What about my genetic material if it's in a state that we have concerns about personhood legislation, right? The week after the election results, I had so many phone calls and emails to return. It was all about, are we okay? What happens next? What is to come? And I think I have to credit Nesta Johnson, who said, like, we don't panic, we plan. So we're going to plan what's next. So helping those clients, like, rightfully so, they're concerned, right? I don't want to perpetuate panic, but they have every right to be concerned. I'm concerned. So how do we best position ourselves with the incoming regime? How do we make sure? And by we, I mean everyone in the LGBTQ community, everyone who's navigating infertility, everyone who's grown their family through any means other than sexual intercourse, right? Anyone, that's a big population of people, okay? How do we best position ourselves going forward so we can make sure the attacks will come? We know that this isn't our first round of this current regime, but the attacks will come. So how do we best defend ourselves, and how do we best advocate in the face of attacks? This is still about advocacy. We're still going to advocate.
Do you have any, quick tips if someone is listening and thinking, okay, I'm past the initial panic and now ready to get into the planning stage. Like, what are the top 2 or 3 things that people should be doing right now?
Maybe it's because of my specific clients, they need to make sure their parental rights are protected in some way, whether it's a judgment of parentage, an adoption order, something. Birth certificates can be changed. They're not entitled to full faith and credit throughout the United States, but a final court order from a court in your state is. So get some order of parentage if it's available to you in your state, whatever that looks like. We saw 2 states in 2023 remove the non-gestating parent from a birth certificate in the context of same-sex couples divorcing who conceived through assisted reproduction. So, and that was, during a Biden presidency. So what is to come is concerning. Protect your parentage in any way you can. Estate planning is a good idea. Everyone that doesn't have estate planning, now is a good time, especially if you're a vulnerable population. Genetic material, make a plan for it. I always counsel my clients to make a plan for their genetic material. Everyone's afraid of what occurred in Alabama happening in their state. We're privileged to be in New England in the sense that we are less concerned, but still concerned. And also, now is a good time. I say this to my LGBTQ clients. If you were ever considering getting married, now may be the time. And it's not because I feel any sort of judgment about being married or not being married. I want people to have all the choices that they possibly can have. But I'm afraid that choice, Dobbs' opinion, dissenting opinion, like Judge Thomas called for this to go away. This is an actual threat. So if you were thinking about getting married for any reason, now might be the time. But if you're not, please know that I respect your decision and I fully support people who don't want to be married, but I'm worried about that.
I'm available to officiate any weddings as well. I would just want to throw myself out there. I have like my online minister certificate or whatever. So all I need is to get like certified in your individual state. So I'll just
Kate, I'll
add
get remarried so you can officiate. I'll renew my vows with Kate as the officiant.
Love to.
That would be amazing.
I did officiate one wedding for a couple I'm really close with in Maine. And that was like a highlight of my life.
Yeah, I've only had one myself, but it was wonderful. And now I'm like just clearly putting myself out there to marry anyone who wants me to.
Perfect. You know what? Some listener's going to take you up on that, Kate.
So we ask all our guests, what is one thing you would say to someone who is just starting to grow their family, sort of as support or advice? And then what's one thing you wish people would never say to people who are struggling to grow their family?
I am going to say that I will spare you any advice. And that is the advice to people giving you advice. Just spare you any advice about your particular family. The only advice I have to anyone who is trying to build their family and facing barriers of any kind, find your support system, whatever that looks like for you. Don't do it alone. Find your support system. That doesn't mean you have to share things you don't want to share. And it doesn't mean you have to be vulnerable or share intimate details of your life, but find the people that you can rely on that are in your corner. I know All Paths has done a great job of helping people find their people. I mean, I have found my people. So I encourage everyone. That is the only advice I will share. And I will never share specifics that are, toxic positivity is not positivity.
Oh, girl, we just love you. Amen. Amen. And I mean, Emily and I are already talking about putting some kind of book together that is all of these responses, because they have been so insightful and each one a little bit unique, a lot of common threads, but each one unique. And that has been so lovely. So thank you so much. It's been such a gift to talk to you today. And we really appreciate you being a guest with us. And we appreciate you being part of the All Paths family and being on our board. So thank you so much, Janene.
Thank you so much, Kate and Emily, for everything, not just today and your time and everything.
We hope you'll join us next time for more family building stories and resources. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts to make sure you never miss an episode. And follow us on social media at All Paths FB, or visit our website, allpathsfb.org, for more information about our work. All Paths Family Building is so grateful to the members of our circle of support who are vital to our ability to provide emotional support, education, and advocacy that is open to anyone struggling to grow their families. Today, we want to send a special thank you to our silver sponsor, Mass General Hospital. Thank you for joining us for this episode. Please help spread the word so that anyone who is struggling to grow their family can join the conversation. It's an honor to walk with you on your family building journey.